Hi, Peter Charles here, Folks for Life Fly Fishing, and welcome to my series on getting started fly fishing. Today let's talk about reels and what you should be buying when you set out to buy your first fly fishing rig. Now, if you're going to out there and buying a combo rig that already comes with the reel, the line, the leader, the rod, the case, you're good to go. You don't have to get anything else. But some of us pick things up bit by bit. You pick up a rod and a reel and the line all separately, and that's fine. You can do that as well. First off, what should you be buying in the way of a reel? Well, let's talk about fly reels in general. I mean, you're familiar with spinning reels. They're very complicated beasts. I mean, you've got multiplier gear in here, which multiplies the turn of the bail with every crank of the handle. You've got an oscillating gear in here. It's a complicated beastie, multiple ball bearings. Compared to this is what we call a single action fly reel. One turn of the crank is one turn of the spool. There's no gearing, nothing at all in here. Very, very simple compared to a spinning reel or a bait casting reel. So you're saying to yourself, well, they can be quite expensive. Why are they so expensive? And are there cheaper alternatives? Well, yes, there are. But price isn't the only consideration. I think the first thing you have to do is get the right size of reel for the rod you're buying. So some manufacturers make it easy. In fact, this manufacturer actually puts the size in the name. This is called an FW58, and which means it's good for anywhere from 5-weight lines to 8-weight lines. When you see a reel that is given a line range like that, usually the lines in the middle are a perfect fit. So in this case, I've got a 6-weight on here, and it's rated from 5 to 8. That works. 7-weight would work on here just fine. An 8 would be a bit of a squeeze, and a 5-weight is probably overkill. But nevertheless, you could use it anything from a 5 to an 8. So if you're going out and buying reels, you will often see that the reel, some of them actually have written on the reel the line sizes that it's meant for. So basically, if you buy a reel too small, you can't fit the line on it. And if you buy a reel too large, it's too big for the rod and it unbalances the rod. And it's just too much reel. So size-wise, it's related to the line rating. So if you've got a 4-weight rod, you bought a 4-weight line, you want to get a reel designed for a 4-weight line. You're good to go at that point. So in terms of construction and price and all that kind of stuff, there's basically two types of construction. There's cast and there's machined. This is a very old reel that's cast, and I believe it's also been sort of machined as well. It's actually a fairly pricey reel in its day. It's probably, I don't know, it's 25 years old, something like that. When you have modern cast reels, they can be quite inexpensive, as little as $50. And they'll do the job for you if you're fishing for bass or trout, pike, any type of species that doesn't run, doesn't charge off and peel line off your reel. They're fine. Don't use them in salt water, though. They cannot take salt water at all. Salt water will wreck them. But in fresh water, they're fine. They'll work just great. A couple of things about them which you have to be aware of. Often the tolerances are a bit sloppy, which can result in a few problems. And the other thing is the drags on them aren't that great. So for example, I hooked into a 15-pound carp while fishing for smallmouth with a cheap cast reel, and it heated up the drag so badly the reel started to seize. So, you know, keep in mind that you get what you pay for. So if you buy a cheap cast reel, it's going to work just fine for bass, pike, trout, no problem. If you get into species that run like very large trout, steelhead, salmon, carp, saltwater species, and you shouldn't be using it in salt anyway, then this reel those kinds of reels are useless to you. So you can get into more expensive reels like this one, which is machined, and it's machined out of a solid billet of aluminum. Think of it as a hockey puck of aluminum, and there'll be two of them, one for the frame and one for the spool. So you've got two hockey pucks of aircraft grade aluminum, and that is machined out of that solid block of aluminum. That's why this is expensive. A reel like this, same idea. It's machined out of two solid blocks of aluminum. The drag is sealed. It's designed for saltwater use. Very expensive, very rugged. So if you're going into salt water, you do have to get a reel that is capable of handling salt water. Now, as far as the drag systems are concerned, some of them have, well, most, virtually all the reels sold today have a disc drag, which operates just like the disc drag on our spinning reel. Basically exactly the same thing. But there are reels on the market where it's just a clicker. Hear that noise? And the purpose of that clicker is not to provide a drag. The only purpose for that is to prevent overspooling. So if the line comes off the reel fast, you don't get a bird's nest. If you're familiar with casting bait casters and the bird's nest you can get in a bait caster, you can have the same thing in a fly reel if it freewheels. So that's the reason why there's a clicker. But it's not really a drag. If you are fishing for species that run, that can be a problem if you don't have a drag. And this one doesn't have a drag either. It has a clicker as well. But it has what we call a palming ring. So you can actually palm the reel like this as the fish is running and actually apply some tension. So you do have the disc drag. As you can see, there's a big disc drag on this reel. Or you can have a reel like this with no disc drag and just a clicker. Now, another consideration is something we refer to as the arbor. On this reel, you can see that aluminum cap here. Well, the center of the spindle of this spool is, what we call the arbor, is about that diameter. So you have to, when you start winding on the backing and then the fly line, it's a relatively small diameter you're starting with, and it keeps the reel quite small. You get a reel this big and you can see the arbor is quite large. And the advantage of this particular design, even though it ends up being a bigger reel, these both will take 5-weight lines, by the way. You look at the size difference. Here's another one. This is a 6-weight reel, and you can see the difference in size between the standard arbor, which is small, and the large arbor reel. But they're both designed to carry the same amount of line. And the reason for that is when you have the large arbor reel design, it picks up line very, very quickly. So if you have to retrieve line fast, it picks up quickly. And when you peel line off, because the line is stored in large loops, it doesn't come off looking like a slinky. It comes off nice and straight. So large arbors have an advantage, but they are bigger. So when you're going out to buy a reel, you have to know, the size, obviously your budget, whether you're going to be going in salt water with it or not, and whether you're going to be fishing for species that run or they don't. Smallmouth bass don't run. If you're fishing for smallmouth bass, you can get away with a cheap reel. So if you're on a budget, you can get away with the cheap reel for freshwater, most freshwater use. You do not need to spend a ton of money and buy something like this just to go catch some smallmouth bass. If you have the money and you want to buy something expensive, go for it. It's no problem at all. You're getting your money's worth. But you can make do with a relatively cheap cast reel if, as I say, you're going after bass or resident trout and that sort of stuff. So that's basically what's involved in buying your first trout reel, and or your first fly reel, I should say. And as I say, just pick up. It's just a thing for storing line, really. We don't have to retrieve like we do with a spinning reel. So they're simple beasts, and there's not an awful lot to the decision. So get out there, buy your first reel, put some line on, and go catch some fish with it. Cheers.